Hey, well, good morning. Welcome back to our devotional series here at 10 o'clock at South City C3 Church. And so my name is John, if you're just catching in right now. We're going to be posting these on Facebook and also hopefully all on YouTube. But here we are this morning, chapter 7 of Russell Moore's book, The Storm-Tossed Family. We're looking at now the construct of marriage and how the cross shapes marriages. Let's take a look. He continues on in this. He says, a ceremony, regardless of how big or how small, is not a party for the couple celebrating their individualized love. The ceremony of whatever sort is a covenantal act. Those gathered are not an audience, but witnesses. This is why in many wedding ceremonies we still have a feature that makes little sense given our cultural presuppositions. It is like the concept of a vestigial organ serving no purpose but pointing back to the need in a previous stage in evolutionary history. I am referring, of course, to the time when in many ceremonies, the officiating minister says, if anyone can show just cause why this man or this woman should not be joined together, let him speak now or forever hold his peace. No one expects anyone to actually, stand up and object, even if everyone in the room thinks the pairing is a bad idea. The closest we could come to imagining such a scenario would be in some cliched film in which an old boyfriend stands up and asks the bride to run off and marry him instead. And yet, this piece is crucial. The state issues a wedding license as a way of saying that there will be a civil consequences for fraudulently making these vows by saying being already married to someone else, or being brother and sister. The civil consequences for breaking these vows, even if that is only the necessity to file the paperwork for divorce. In a Christian marriage, the gathered witnesses are a sign that the church is here to hold the couple accountable to their vows before God. The marriage is not just about the couple, about the gospel, but this means the marriage is the business of the whole church. This accountability refers, first of all, to the covenant aspect of one flesh union, the vow of fidelity and to permanence. Covenant fidelity means that, quote, what God has joined together, let no one put asunder. Just as Jesus had given us signs of his covenant with the church in baptism and in the Lord's Supper, pointing us back to something he objectively did for us in joining us to himself in his atoning work. Marriage is an ongoing commitment to be one flesh, regardless of what forces would seek to tear us apart from one another. That does not mean simply sexual fidelity, although it does, of course, mean that, but a fidelity to actively love each other no matter the cost, as, quote, Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, Ephesians 5:25. Several years ago, I happened upon a clip of a television evangelist answering questions written in from his audience. A desperate man sent along his dilemma. His wife had dementia, advanced to the point that she couldn't recognize him, but the man wanted to date other women. This seemed to be a simple answer for a confessional evangelical, as, quote, you shall not commit adultery, is not a complicated matter of biblical interpretation. I was stunned when the Christian talk show host told the man he should first divorce his wife before dating the new woman. The wife, the preacher said, is, quote, not there anymore. This was more than an embarrassment. This was more than cruelty. This was a repudiation of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Of course, his logic would seem to make sense. He is right that the sick woman won't know if her husband is at dinner or with someone else. She wouldn't know she's divorced. In that sense, she's not there. That makes sense, and that's the problem. To step away from his wife, to whom this man has vowed his life before God, is to project a different mystery that of a man who loves his own flesh but not his bride, of a Christ who will not carry a cross for his people. This is not just bad marriage advice, but bad gospel. I do not understand why a man would be tempted to walk away from his dementia-riddled wife. Someone with this sort of debilitating disease cannot do anything for her husband. There's no romance, no sex, no partnership, not even companionship. If marriage is just a sum of these parts, then why wouldn't you leave when they were gone? Just Jesus had a bride who did not recognize him anymore. She forgot who she was and denied who he was. The bride of Christ fled his side and went back to her old way of life. Jesus did not divorce her. He did not leave her behind. When Jesus came to his church after his resurrection, the church was about the same things the members of it were doing when they met Jesus in the first place. Out on boats, nets in hand. Jesus didn't walk away. He stood by his words, stood by his bride. He walked out to the place of the skull, to the valley of Sheol, and indeed beyond it all for his bride. Marriage is to reflect this. And as it does so, it points us all back to Christ, who is present in the vulnerable, in the marginalized, and in the least of these. Sometimes, though, Christians will come to marriage with a kind of implied prenuptial agreement of what to do if the marriage doesn't meet one's needs and wants. It may never be spoken, but many couples have a secret nuclear arsenal, the possibility of divorce, that they hope never to use except the way that most countries use their nuclear arsenal as a deterrent against getting hurt by the other party. In other words, I promise not to divorce you as long as I can live with you. This contractual view of marriage is not, however, that of the Christian gospel. It makes as little sense as a contract between one's mouth and one's stomach, stipulating how the stomach will retaliate should the mouth withhold nutrients. If, in fact, a couple are joined together as one flesh, a preordained exit strategy, even if unspoken, is little more than a pre-negotiated divorce. If divorce is a possibility for you, you will find a reason to pursue it. Your spouse will not meet all of your expectations. You will not meet your spouse's expectations. You probably have not, and I hope, planned out how you will take care of your financial assets should you murder your spouse. Why not? After all, sometimes murders happen in marriages. You don't plan out of these contingencies because murdering your spouse should be unthinkable. Sadly, tearing asunder the one flesh union is all too thinkable, even for many Christians. Such is not the case if we see ourselves as one flesh, joined together by covenant. This covenant is renewed by memory. Notice how often in the scriptures we are told to, quote, remember what God has done objectively for us. The children of Israel are told when it seems that God has abandoned them to remember that he delivered them from Egypt. When walking through the valley of the shadow of death, David remembers the rod and staff of his good shepherd. When tempted to slide back into idolatry and a wasted life, Christians are told to remember that we are not our own, but are bought with a price. That is true with the gospel, and it is true also with marriage. Every marriage will hit crisis. Someone will get sick, someone will be fired, someone will cheat, or a number of possibilities. The memory of covenant, of the gospel mystery of marriage, is what it takes for us to fight when the world, the flesh, and the devil threaten to tear us apart. It's interesting. One of the things that I've had conversations with couples when I do premarital counseling is I talk a lot about this whole prenuptial agreement as it being almost the beginning to an end and the end being divorce. It's almost like you're almost writing in an exit strategy while you're getting prepared to get married. And too many times I'd be sitting in an office having conversations about money and assets and how we're setting up things for the children. But it is true. It's almost like this unseen nuclear button where it's like, well, and if things go sideways, I need to protect myself. I need to protect, I gotta have this nest egg set aside. I gotta make sure that I'm gonna come out of it, with something. I don't want to get taken to the cleaners. And that mentality, too many times, and I love what Russell Moore said, is if you start that way, you're gonna end that way. Now, it doesn't happen every time. There's people that have had these legal clauses put in, and sometimes they've never even had to look at it. But it's just the thought of when as you prepare to get married, you're already preparing an exit strategy if I think one of the things I say to couples a lot is you can't throw around the D word like if it's some kind of weapon either. To rule another person with fear by your power and authority, saying, I'll divorce you. Imagine if that was Jesus. When he saw your sin, you woke up this morning, you had sin in your life, whatever it was. You hurt someone, said something, did something, or better, you didn't do something, sins of omission, sins of commission. And then Jesus just woke up in the morning with you and said, yeah, I want a divorce. I'm done with you. I've tried, but it's just not working out. Call it irreconcilable differences. Oh my gosh. It'd be horrible. But we have a loving Savior that he carried his cross all the way to Skull Hill, said, it is finished. In other words, he's saying sin is finished. Death is finished. This idea of divorce is finished. I've come to give you life and life to the fullest. And I'm with you no matter what. I'm not going to divorce you. I'm not going to abandon you. And it's not written in my exit strategy. It's not a prenuptial agreement. I don't have a secret clause in the Holy Scriptures that says I can get out of this. And if you read the Old Testament and the New Testament together, you see the nature, the character of a loving Father that looks out for his people always. And rejoice in the Lord always. God bless you guys this morning. It's so good to be with you in the morning, to start a day with prayer and the word. Lord, I pray blessing over you, those that are watching and those that are watching later. May the Lord's favor rest upon you in the name of Jesus. We love you. We're caring for you. It's kind of a rainy, stormy day, but stay warm, drink some hot coffee, and connect with one another. Remember, the church is not just in, Colombo Street. Church is right where you're at right now. Go, connect with someone, reach out, say, hey, you know what? Haven't seen you, haven't heard from you. Let's get a cup of coffee or do a Zoom or do a Facebook thing and just be the church, y'all. All right. God bless you. And I'll see you Sunday. Bye for now.